I was a self-made construction mogul who had spent 30 years building a $20 million empire to provide a perfect life for my family. Then I overheard my wife and son-in-law laughing about how they had documented my assets for months to strip me bare in a surprise divorce. I didn't confront them. I simply smiled, let them file their false affidavits, and waited for their day in court. Instead of a multi-million-dollar settlement, the judge handed them an immediate eviction notice and an arrest warrant for embezzlement. Before I reveal the single piece of evidence that turned the judge against them, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and please subscribe if you believe that the truth always comes out in the end. 5 minutes earlier, I had called my daughter Kendra to surprise her with dinner plans, but she had told me she was not home. "Sorry, Dad, I am working a late shift at the clinic, but Marcus is there working on some case files," she had said cheerfully. Yet here was Brenda's silver Lexus parked brazenly in the driveway. I killed the engine and approached the window on trembling legs. Through the gap in the curtains, I could see them clearly. My wife of 30 years was lounging on my daughter's couch, like she owned the place, and Marcus was leaning against the bookshelf with that smug expression I had grown to despise. "Timeline is perfect," Marcus was saying, his lawyer voice crisp with satisfaction. "We file in June and claim irreconcilable differences. With the new statutes, Brenda, you are entitled to half of everything acquired during marriage plus spousal support for life." Brenda laughed, that tinkling sound I had once found charming. "The construction business alone is worth $12 million. Add the rental properties, the vacation home investments. We are looking at nearly $20 million total." My hands shook as I fumbled for my phone, hitting record just as Marcus continued his legal dissertation. The beautiful part is his trusting nature. Isaiah has no idea we have been documenting his assets for months. Bank statements, property deeds, business valuations, everything is already copied. He gestured toward a manila folder on the coffee table. He practically handed us the keys to his kingdom. 2 years of playing the devoted wife, Brenda said, examining her manicured nails, pretending to care about his boring construction stories, nodding sympathetically when he worried about payroll or the cost of lumber. God, the man actually believes I love him. He thinks because he built this life with his bare hands that he deserves to keep it. A twig snapped under my foot. Both of them froze, mid-conversation heads turning toward the window like startled deer. I pressed myself against the brick wall, heart hammering against my ribs, sweat beading despite the April chill. "Did you hear something?" Brenda's voice carried a note of suspicion. "Probably just the neighbor's cat," Marcus replied after a pause. "You are paranoid. Can you blame me if Isaiah discovered this before we are ready?" "He won't. The man couldn't spot a conspiracy if it wore a neon sign." Marcus's laughter held nothing but contempt. "By September, you will be divorced, wealthy, and free to do whatever you want." I forced myself to stay hidden until their conversation resumed, my phone capturing every venomous word. When I finally crept back to my car 15 minutes later, my entire world had shifted on its axis. 30 years of marriage reduced to a legal strategy session between my wife and son-in-law. The folder on that coffee table haunted me. Months of planning, documentation, preparation. While I had been working 16-hour days to build our future, they had been systematically mapping its destruction. I sat in the driver's seat, staring at my hands wrapped around the steering wheel. The same hands that had built a construction empire from nothing that had provided every comfort Brenda enjoyed. The front door opened just as I reached for my car keys. Brenda emerged first, her designer handbag swinging casually at her side, followed by Marcus adjusting his tie with practiced precision. Neither expected to find me sitting in my truck, and the shock registered on Brenda's face like a slap. "Isaiah." Her voice climbed an octave. "What are you doing here?" I forced my expression into something resembling normalcy, though my pulse thundered in my ears. "Just finished a job site inspection nearby." I lied smoothly, climbing out of the car. "Thought I would stop by and see Kendra." Marcus stepped protectively closer to Brenda, his lawyer instincts kicking in. Those pale gray eyes studied my face with uncomfortable intensity, searching for cracks in my story. "She is not here," Brenda said quickly. I was helping Marcus organize some legal documents for a client." The lie rolled off her tongue with practiced ease. "Oh," I kept my voice light conversational. "I thought you would be at work until 6 today. Didn't you mention something about the Henderson proposal this morning?" A flicker of panic crossed her features. "I left early. Headache." "Sorry to hear that." I turned to Marcus with manufactured friendliness. "Working on an interesting case." "Asset division," he replied without thinking, then caught himself. "For a divorce client, very complex financial situation." The irony would have been amusing if it were not destroying my life. "Oh, Brenda," I said, pausing by the door. "Dr. Robinson's office called about rescheduling your physical. Something about a conflict with your work schedule." Her face went blank for a split second. The look of someone whose lie had been exposed. Then she recovered with impressive speed. "Must be a mix-up. I will call them later." I slid into the driver's seat, heart hammering. As I backed out of the driveway, I watched them in my rearview mirror. They stood frozen until my truck disappeared around the corner, then immediately moved closer together, heads bent in urgent conversation. The 15-minute drive home passed in a blur of traffic lights and muscle memory. My truck found its way into our circular driveway without conscious direction. Past the manicured gardens Brenda insisted we pay someone else to maintain, past the fountain she had commissioned for our 20th anniversary. I sat in the car for several minutes, staring at the house I had built with my own hands in 1995. Every board, every nail, every carefully planned detail had been a love letter to the woman who was now plotting to steal it from me. The front door opened into silence that felt different now, not peaceful, but hollow. Brenda's presence had always filled these rooms with chatter about her day, complaints about neighbors' excitement over new purchases. Now I wondered how much of it had been performance. The wedding photo on the mantel caught my eye first. December 15, the 1987. Brenda, radiant in ivory silk. Me awkward in a rented tuxedo. Both of us glowing with what I had believed was genuine happiness. She had been 22, working as a secretary downtown. I was 37, my construction business finally turning real profit after 10 years of 12-hour days and instant noodle dinners. We had met at the company Christmas party that year. Brenda had laughed at my terrible joke about concrete mixers, a sound like silver bells that made my chest tighten with unexpected longing. When I asked her to dinner, she had blushed and said yes so quickly, I wondered if she had been waiting for me to ask. Our first date stretched until midnight. She listened with genuine interest as I described my dreams of building something lasting, something that would outlive us both. "You are not just building structures," she had said, reaching across the table to touch my hand. "You are building homes." I had proposed 6 months later. The kitchen table held our 25th anniversary card from last December. Brenda's handwriting still elegant in blue ink. "To my wonderful husband, thank you for making all my dreams come true. Here's to 25 more years of happiness. All my love, Brenda." All her love. The phrase tasted bitter now. I moved to the living room, where Kendra's baby pictures lined the built-in shelves I had crafted during Brenda's pregnancy. June 8, 1995, the day our daughter was born. Brenda exhausted, but radiant, holding our red-faced miracle like she had been created for motherhood. Those first years had been the happiest of my life. Brenda threw herself into being a mother with the same intensity she had once brought to planning our wedding. Parent-teacher conferences, soccer games, birthday parties with elaborate themes. She documented every moment with fierce maternal pride. "You are the best father in the world," she told me the night Kendra graduated high school, tears streaming down her face as we watched our daughter accept her diploma. "She is going to do incredible things because of the foundation you gave her." The foundation I gave her, not we. Had the cracks been showing even then? I sank into my leather recliner, the one Brenda always complained was too ugly for the formal living room, and let the memories wash over me. Our 10th anniversary cruise to Alaska. Brenda genuinely delighted by the glaciers and wildlife. Kendra's college graduation, all of us crying as she walked across the stage with her psychology degree. Christmas mornings filled with laughter and chaos. Brenda insisting on elaborate decorations that took weeks to install and one day to dismantle. When had gratitude transformed into entitlement? When had "thank you for providing this life" become "we deserve so much more"? The recording of my phone held the answer. Brenda had not loved me in years, possibly decades. Every kiss, every anniversary celebration, every "I love you" whispered in the darkness had been calculated. Manipulation designed to keep me working, earning, building wealth she could eventually claim as her own. 30 years of my life reduced to a legal strategy session. I sat in the growing darkness of our living room, surrounded by the evidence of what I had believed was a happy marriage, and felt something cold and analytical settling over the grief. Brenda thought she was playing the long game, positioning herself for maximum financial gain while maintaining plausible deniability. She had no idea her husband possessed the same strategic mind that had built a construction empire from nothing. The game was about to change. The living room silence wrapped around me as I forced myself to think like the businessman I'd always been. When had Brenda's behavior shifted from genuine partnership to calculated positioning? The answer came with uncomfortable clarity. 2020, when Banks Construction landed the Morrison Municipal Center contract. $50 million over 3 years, the largest project in company history. I had come home that April evening, expecting celebration, maybe champagne, definitely the enthusiastic support that had sustained me through every previous milestone. Instead, Brenda had been sitting at the kitchen table with a real estate magazine and a calculator. "This means we can finally afford the house on Elm Street," she had announced without looking up. "The one with the circular driveway and the pool. The Hendersons are asking $4 million. Not congratulations on the achievement. Not pride in the work that would employ 300 people for 3 years. Just immediate focus on what my success could buy her. Isaiah, I have not even started the project yet. There is design work, permits, subcontractor negotiations, but the money is guaranteed, right?" She had finally looked at me, then her brown eyes calculating. "I mean, once you sign the contract, the city has to pay." The conversation had lasted 2 hours. She had mapped out expenditures down to the last detail. The new house, country club membership, luxury cars, European vacations. Not our expenditures, hers. Pronouns had been telling, though I'd been too focused on project logistics to notice. By 2021, the demands had escalated. The country club membership became non-negotiable when the Pattersons joined Riverside Hills. Our perfectly adequate vacation cabin in Wisconsin became embarrassing compared to the Johnsons' place in Aspen. Brenda began dropping hints about other wives whose husbands really understood how to treat a woman. The physical intimacy disappeared gradually, so slowly I had attributed it to age and stress. Separate bedrooms became necessary because of my snoring, though Brenda had never complained about snoring in 23 years of marriage. Dinner conversations shifted from discussions of our day to Brenda's detailed accounts of what other families owned, achieved, or displayed. Sarah Mitchell's husband bought her a Mercedes for their anniversary. She had mentioned last month cutting her salmon with surgical precision, just because he appreciated everything she had sacrificed for their marriage. Sacrificed as if supporting my career while living in luxury had required significant personal loss. The friendship with Marcus had intensified after Kendra's wedding in September 2023. Suddenly, Brenda was fascinated by legal proceedings, asking hypothetical questions about property division and spousal rights for a friend who might need advice. She had started receiving phone calls that sent her to the other room, claiming they were book club discussions or volunteer committee meetings. How many of those calls had been conspiracy sessions? I pulled out my phone and replayed segments of today's recording. Marcus's voice. We have been documenting his assets for months. Brenda's laughter. 30 years of playing the devoted wife. The documentation made sense now. Brenda's sudden interest in my financial reports. Her questions about business valuations. Her insistence on joint accounts while maintaining her own separate credit cards. She had been conducting reconnaissance, while I had been building the very empire she planned to steal. But Brenda had made a crucial error in her strategic planning. She had underestimated the man who built Banks Construction from a single truck and a borrowed tool set. The same analytical mind that had navigated 35 years of construction projects, labor negotiations, and municipal contracts was now focused on a different kind of problem solving. They thought they were playing chess with someone who did not know the rules. Brenda had spent months positioning her pieces, while assuming I would never notice the board. She was about to discover that her husband understood strategy better than she had ever imagined. I stood up from the recliner and walked to my home office, where files containing 35 years of business records lined built-in shelves. Tax returns, contracts, partnership agreements, property deeds, everything Brenda thought she had been secretly documenting. But I knew something she didn't. The real assets were not in those files. I reached for my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I needed. Tyrell Webb, my accountant, my friend, and the only person who knew about the irrevocable trust arrangements I had established years ago for tax optimization purposes. Time to make a call that would change everything. 3 days of methodical research had transformed my home office into a war room. 2 laptops hummed quietly on the mahogany desk I had built 15 years ago, their screens displaying bank statements, legal databases, and property records. Yellow legal pads covered every surface, filled with columns labeled assets, weaknesses, timeline, and leverage points. I had shaved carefully that morning, put on my best navy suit, and slipped on the reading glasses Brenda always said made me look distinguished. Strange how quickly grief could crystallize into strategy when you had 35 years of business experience to draw from. Tyrell Webb had been more helpful than I dared hope. 3 irrevocable trusts I had established years ago for tax optimization were completely legal, fully documented, but invisible to anyone without forensic accounting skills. Brenda's amateur reconnaissance mission had missed the real treasure. She had been cataloging the visible kingdom, while the crown jewels remained hidden in plain sight. But Brenda had been busy too. Her credit card statements told a fascinating story. $47,000 in unauthorized transfers over 8 months, funneled to a joint savings account I had never opened. The beneficiary name made my jaw clench. Marcus Thompson. They had been positioning themselves as financial partners long before their divorce conspiracy began. Luxury lunches at Riverside Country Club, $300 spa treatments, designer clothing purchases that coincided suspiciously with her book club meetings. Every expense painted a picture of a woman preparing for a different life. The 8th handbag she had bought last Tuesday carried particular irony given that she had complained about grocery costs just that morning. Marcus's vulnerabilities proved even more illuminating. My construction industry contacts had been generous with information about Davenport's most ambitious attorney. The man who planned to steal my fortune was drowning in debt. $180,000 in student loans and an $8,500 monthly office lease chosen for image over prudence. He was building a reputation for cutting ethical corners when payment schedules got tight. Thompson is a sharp lawyer. Jim Morrison from Morrison Concrete had told me over coffee, but he has got champagne tastes on a beer budget. Owes 3 of my subcontractors nearly $25,000 total. Always promises payment next week and then disappears when the bills come due. The State Bar Association's website revealed 2 dismissed ethical complaints in the past year, both involving client fund mismanagement. Dismissed, but documented. In legal circles, even unsuccessful complaints left stains on professional reputations. I leaned back in my leather chair, surveying the intelligence gathered over 72 hours of patient investigation. Brenda and Marcus had underestimated their opponent catastrophically. They had seen a trusting husband who worked long hours and rarely questioned household expenses. They had failed to recognize the analytical mind that had built Banks Construction from a single truck into a $12 million enterprise. By 10 o'clock, I was sitting across from Tom Bradley, president of First National Bank, and my golf partner for 15 years. The mahogany conference room smelled of coffee and leather familiar territory where I had negotiated dozens of construction loans. Account security review, I said, sliding documents across the polished table. I need all joint access points verified and temporarily frozen pending identity confirmation. Tom's eyebrows rose slightly. This is comprehensive, Isaiah. Every joint account, credit line, and automatic payment system. Every single one. May I ask why? You may not, but I smiled when I said it. How long for the security holds to take effect? Immediately upon your signature, all account holders will receive notification that access requires in-person verification with photo ID and secondary documentation. Tom studied my face. This is going to inconvenience Brenda significantly. I am counting on it. The security holds activated at 11:47, just as Brenda was sitting down for her weekly lunch at Riverside Country Club with 3 other construction wives. My phone buzzed with the first declined transaction at 12:03. I was reviewing contractor bids when Brenda's panicked call came at 12:50. Isaiah, something is wrong with our accounts. My card was declined at lunch, and when I called the bank, they said there is a security hole. Do you know anything about this? Perfect innocence. No mention of the joint account with Marcus's name. No acknowledgement of the missing $47,000. No admission that she had been moving money without my knowledge. Security hold, I said, keeping my voice calm. That sounds serious. Did they say what triggered it? Something about verifying identity and account access. It is embarrassing, Isaiah. I am sitting here with Linda, Susan, and Janet, and I can't even pay for my own lunch." The distress in her voice was genuine, not because her conspiracy was threatened, but because her social status had been publicly compromised. After 30 years of marriage, I knew Brenda's priorities. "I will call Tom Bradley immediately," I assured her. "We will get this sorted out." But I did not call Tom. Instead, I drove to the construction site where my crew was pouring foundation for the new medical center. The familiar sounds of machinery and worker voices felt grounding after 3 days of financial warfare. My phone buzzed with text messages throughout the afternoon. "Brenda at 1:47. Still cannot access any accounts. This is ridiculous." "Brenda at 2:23. Tom Bradley's secretary says he is in meetings all day. What kind of bank president is too busy for his best customers?" "Brenda at 3:15. Even our emergency credit line is frozen. How am I supposed to buy groceries?" Each message brought a grim satisfaction. For 30 years, Brenda had taken financial security for granted, while I worked 60-hour weeks to provide it. Now she was experiencing what it felt like when that security vanished without warning. I could imagine the scene at the Riverside Country Club perfectly. The waiter approaching the table with that apologetic look that wealthy people dread more than death. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Banks," he would say, loud enough for Linda and Susan to hear. The card was declined. Brenda would laugh, that high-pitched, nervous laugh. "Try it again." "It must be the chip. I barely used it today." But the waiter would not try it again. He would produce the small silver scissors kept for this exact purpose. The bank's instructions were specific, Mrs. Banks. "Retain and destroy." The snip of plastic would sound like a gunshot in the hushed dining room. Linda Patterson, who Brenda had lunched with for 5 years, would suddenly find her water glass fascinating. Susan would check her watch, claiming a forgotten appointment. Brenda would be left alone with the bill and the shredded remains of her social status. She had built her entire identity on being the wife of Banks Construction, yet she could not even pay for a Caesar salad. Marcus's reaction proved even more interesting. At 4:30, my private investigator, Mike Rodriguez, called with an update. "Thompson tried to access his shared account with your wife 3 times this afternoon. When that failed, he attempted to withdraw funds from what appears to be a trust account. Probably your daughter's education fund that he manages. That one is frozen too, per your instructions." Mike paused, letting the information sink in. "He is at the ATM on 4th Street, right now, kicking the machine. Angry phone calls to bank representatives. Threats about legal action, demands to speak with management. Classic overconfident attorney, discovering his leverage has evaporated. Marcus needed that money. My research into his gambling debts suggested the bookies were not as patient as the bank. He had likely promised them payment today, counting on the unauthorized transfer from Brenda. Now he was standing on a street corner, realizing the well had run dry. By 6 o'clock, I was home reviewing the day's financial battlefield from my office. Every shared account, frozen every joint credit line, suspended every automatic payment system, requiring my personal authorization. Brenda's access to 30 years of accumulated wealth had been reduced to whatever cash she carried in her purse. The security measures were completely legal, a husband protecting marital assets, pending estate planning review. Tom Bradley would confirm that standard banking protocols had been followed precisely. But Brenda and Marcus would understand the message perfectly. The man they had planned to financially ambush was no longer playing defense. My phone rang at 6:47. Brenda's number, But the voice that answered would be desperate now, not manipulative. Time to see how quickly conspirators turned on each other when their plans started crumbling. I let it ring 3 times before answering. "Isaiah, where have you been?" Her voice was shrill, tight with panic. "I have been trying to reach you all afternoon." I kept my tone even unbothered. "I told you, Brenda, I was at the job site. The signal is terrible down in the foundation pit." "What is the matter?" "The matter is that I was humiliated today, Isaiah." Humiliated. My card was cut up in front of Linda and Susan. I had to ask Janet to pay for my lunch. Do you have any idea how that looks? I leaned back in my chair, closing my eyes. "It sounds like a terrible misunderstanding, Brenda. I left a message for Tom, but you know how banks are with security protocols. It might take a few days to sort out." "A few days?" She practically screamed. "I have zero access to money, Isaiah." "Nothing." "Then perhaps you should ask your son-in-law for a loan," I thought, did not say. Instead, I offered a solution that I knew would sting. "I have some cash in the safe, if you need groceries. We can make do until the bank clears this up. We do not need to spend money to be happy, right?" The silence on the other end was deafening. I hung up before she could respond. The first domino had fallen. The after-hour security guard at Thompson and associates barely looked up as Brenda rushed through the lobby at 7:15. Her heels clicked frantically on the marble floor, a sharp contrast to the composed woman who usually glided through these halls. I knew this because Mike Rodriguez had positioned himself in the coffee shop across the street with a clear view of the building entrance. The frantic call Brenda had made from our driveway, saying, "Dan, we need to talk immediately. Something has gone terribly wrong," had been loud enough for our next-door neighbor to overhear. Not that Brenda cared about discretion anymore. On the 14th floor, Marcus's corner office glowed with emergency session intensity. Through his window, anyone with binoculars could see 2 figures hunched over a conference table covered with documents, their body language screaming crisis management. "He knows." Brenda's voice carried through the building's older ventilation system to the accounting firm next door, where Mike's contact maintained an office. "Isaiah knows something, and he is cutting off everything." I could not even buy gas for my car. Marcus's response was sharp, professional, his litigation voice engaged, but underneath it was the tremor of a man watching his own life unravel. "The timing is not coincidental. 3 days ago, you said he showed up unexpectedly at Kendra's house, right when we were discussing strategy. He must have overheard something. How much could he have heard? Enough to understand we are not playing around." Papers rustled as Marcus reviewed documents. "Brenda, we need to assume he recorded our conversation. Everything we said about assets, timeline, strategy, all of it potentially documented." The silence that followed spoke volumes. 2 conspirators, realizing their victim had been several moves ahead while they had congratulated themselves on their cleverness. "What do we do?" Brenda's voice had lost its earlier confidence. "We accelerate everything. No more gradual approach. No more careful positioning. Monday morning, I file for emergency divorce proceedings with immediate spousal support. We claim Isaiah is engaging in financial abuse by restricting your access to marital assets." Financial abuse. Brenda's tone sharpened with interest. "That sounds legally compelling." Marcus continued pacing the room. "We paint him as a controlling husband who uses money to manipulate and intimidate. The frozen accounts become evidence of his abusive patterns, not defensive strategy." More rustling papers, the sound of a legal mind shifting into full attack mode. I will need you to document instances of emotional abuse, financial control, intimidation tactics. Think back over your marriage. Anytime Isaiah made financial decisions without consulting you, anytime he questioned your spending, anytime he used money to influence your behavior. That is going to be difficult, Brenda said. Isaiah has never been controlling about money. If anything, he has been too generous. Then we reframe generosity as manipulation. His providing for you becomes evidence that he created financial dependency to maintain control. Every gift, every luxury, every comfortable lifestyle choice becomes proof of his systematic isolation strategy. The breathtaking audacity was impressive in its comprehensive evil. They were planning to weaponize 30 years of my dedication and generosity, twisting every act of love into evidence of abuse. What about Kendra? Brenda asked. She is not going to automatically take my side. Her psychology training makes her skeptical of everything. That is actually perfect, Marcus said, his voice carrying the satisfaction of a man who had found his closing argument. Kendra's hesitation to support you immediately becomes evidence of how thoroughly Isaiah has manipulated family dynamics. We position her psychology training as something Isaiah exploited to turn his own daughter against her mother's emotional needs. You want to make our daughter a witness against her father. I want to save your financial future, Brenda. And I need to save myself, Marcus thought, but did not say. The $180,000 in student loans and the gambling debts he was hiding were pressing down on him. Without access to the trust account he had tried to raid earlier, he was days away from defaulting on payments to very dangerous people. Monday morning, Marcus continued. I file for emergency restraining orders, preventing further asset movement, immediate spousal support of $15,000 monthly, and temporary exclusive occupancy of the marital home. By Wednesday, we will have him painted as an abusive husband who needs court supervision to prevent further financial intimidation. And if he fights back, then we escalate. Harassment charges if he contacts you directly. Stalking allegations if he investigates our activities. Emotional abuse claims if he questions any of our accusations. The beauty of domestic abuse law is that denial becomes evidence of guilt. The harder he fights, the more controlling he appears. Brenda's laughter held no warmth. Poor Isaiah. He has no idea what he has unleashed. 30 years of playing the trusting husband. Time to teach him that nice guys finish last. They spent another hour coordinating their stories, establishing secure communication methods, and preparing for what Marcus called total legal warfare. Every conversation, every interaction, every financial transaction would be documented as evidence of my systematic abuse pattern. The conspiracy had evolved from simple asset grab to character assassination campaign, designed to destroy not just my finances, but my reputation, my relationship with my daughter, and my standing in the community I had helped build for 3 decades. As Brenda finally left the building at 9:30, her phone was already buzzing with Marcus's first strategic text. Remember, you are not an angry wife anymore. You are a terrified victim, finally finding courage to escape your abuser. The war had officially begun. Saturday morning found Brenda and Kendra at Cafe Luna, the bistro, where they had shared monthly mother and daughter brunches for 5 years. Brenda had chosen their usual corner table, intimate, private, and perfect for confidential conversations. But this time, she had positioned herself as a woman seeking her daughter's professional help rather than maternal support. She wore a simple beige cardigan instead of her usual designer blazer, and her face was scrubbed clean of makeup to emphasize her pale complexion. It was a costume designed to evoke sympathy, but Kendra noticed that the diamond studs in her mother's ears were new. "Kendra, I need to talk to you about your father," Brenda began, her voice carrying carefully calibrated vulnerability. "I think something is wrong with him mentally." Kendra set down her coffee cup with the deliberate precision she used when shifting into therapist mode. She had spent the last 48 hours worrying about the tension she had sensed over the phone, but this opening salvo was not what she had expected. "What kind of wrong, Mom?" "Controlling behaviors, paranoid thinking. He has been restricting my access to our accounts, claiming it is for security reasons." But Brenda let her voice trail off, allowing her daughter's imagination to fill the blanks. "How long has this been going on?" Kendra asked, keeping her tone neutral. "Months, maybe longer. I just attributed it to work stress. But yesterday, he completely frozen me out of every account we share. I could not even buy lunch." Kendra leaned forward, her psychological training engaged, despite personal involvement. "Mom, financial control can be a form of domestic abuse, but it can also be legitimate financial management during business transitions or legal concerns." "What is Dad's explanation?" The question was too direct, too professionally neutral. Brenda had expected emotional support, not clinical analysis. "He claims it is routine account security. But Kendra, I have been married to him for 30 years. This is not routine. This is punishment for something." "Punishment for what?" Brenda hesitated. How much could she reveal without exposing her own conspiracy? "I think he suspects I have been questioning our marriage. Maybe he is trying to intimidate me into staying." Mom Kendra's voice carried the patience of someone who had spent years treating manipulative patients. "Are you telling me Dad is financially abusing you to prevent divorce? Or are you telling me you are considering divorce and Dad is protecting assets?" The distinction cut too close to the truth. Brenda shifted tactics. "I am telling you that your father has been exhibiting concerning behavioral changes. And as a psychologist, I thought you might have insights about what is happening. As a psychologist, I would say that major behavioral changes usually have identifiable triggers. What happened 3 days ago that might have caused Dad to suddenly restrict account access?" Brenda's mind raced. Kendra was too well trained to accept emotional manipulation without evidence. Every question revealed the gaps in Brenda's victim narrative. "I do not know what triggered it. That is what scares me. I think he is losing his grip on reality. He sits in that office for hours staring at papers. He is paranoid about everyone. Even Marcus." Kendra studied her mother's face with clinical detachment, reading micro-expressions and verbal inconsistencies with professional skill. "Even Marcus," she repeated slowly. "Why would Dad be paranoid about his own lawyer unless he had reason to be?" Brenda flinched. The mention of Marcus had been a mistake. "It is just part of the pattern, Kendra. He trusts no one. I am afraid of what he might do next. I was hoping you could write something. A letter, maybe. Attesting to the fact that these behaviors are concerning." The request hung in the air between them, heavy and inappropriate. "You want me to provide a professional opinion on my father's mental state without a formal evaluation." "I want you to protect your mother," Brenda whispered, reaching across the table to squeeze Kendra's hand. Her grip was tight, urgent. "If he is unstable, we need to document it. For his own good." Kendra pulled her hand back slowly. "Mom, professional ethics prevent me from diagnosing family members. You know that. And frankly, asking me to document my father's instability based solely on your description of financial disputes puts me in a terrible position." Brenda's eyes narrowed. The fragile victim mask slipped for a fraction of a second, revealing the anger underneath. So you are going to take his side. You are going to let him humiliate me. I am not taking sides, Mom. I am asking for facts. And the facts you are giving me do not add up. Dad has been the steadiest person I know for 30 years. If he has locked the accounts, he has a reason. I suggest you have an honest conversation with him instead of asking me to psychoanalyze him based on your interpretation of his behavior. Brenda stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I thought I could count on you. Clearly, your father's manipulation has reached you too. She threw a $20 bill onto the table, a gesture of defiance from a woman claiming poverty, and stormed out of the cafe. Kendra watched her go, feeling a knot of dread tighten in her stomach. She had seen that look on her mother's face before. It was the look of someone who had tried the easy way and was now ready to do whatever was necessary to win. Kendra took a sip of her cold coffee. She needed to see her father, and she needed to see him today. Meanwhile, 40 miles away at Banks Construction's headquarters, I was receiving intelligence that would reshape the entire battlefield. My office felt solid and grounding, a fortress of brick and steel that stood in stark contrast to the house of cards Marcus had built. Jim Morrison's call came at 10:15, just as I was reviewing weekend job site reports. Isaiah thought you would want to know. Marcus Thompson has got problems brewing with the State Bar Association. Word is, they are investigating his handling of contractor payments on the Mitchell case. I sat down, my coffee mind, immediately calculating the implications. What kind of problems, Jim? Serious enough that the Bar Association scheduled a hearing for next week. Thompson is scrambling to find $23,000 to make the subcontractors whole before the investigation concludes. $23,000. The exact amount Marcus owed according to my research. Jim, would those subcontractors be willing to discuss their experience with Thompson if someone from the construction community reached out? Absolutely. These guys are furious. Thompson promised payment for 6 months, always had excuses, always blamed delays on his client or court procedures. They are small operators who cannot afford to absorb those losses. I spent the next 3 hours making strategic phone calls. Bob Martinez from Martinez Electrical, who had been waiting 8 months for $7,400. Steve Chen from Chen Plumbing owed $9,200 since last October. Randy Foster from Foster Roofing, still waiting for $6,500 from a job completed in November. Each conversation followed the same pattern. Professional courtesy, calls from Banks Construction checking references before potentially hiring Thompson for legal services. Each contractor was eager to share warnings about Marcus's payment practices, ethical shortcuts, and professional unreliability. By 1 o'clock, I had documented evidence of Marcus's systematic pattern of using client trust accounts as personal banking, violating state bar regulations and misleading subcontractors about payment timelines. It was not just bad business. It was theft. He had taken money from his clients expressly designated for these expenses and diverted it to fund his own lifestyle. The leased BMW, the custom suits, the dinners at steakhouses. He had literally eaten the money meant to feed these men's families. At 2:30, I called the State Bar Association's ethical complaint hotline. I would like to file a formal complaint about attorney misconduct, I told the intake specialist. Daniel Marcus Thompson has engaged in a pattern of client trust account violations and has made misleading representations to construction industry professionals. Complaint form asked for detailed documentation. I provided contractor names, amounts owed, timeline of misrepresentations, and evidence of Marcus's systematic abuse of client funds. 3 additional contractors agreed to serve as witnesses if needed. By 4 o'clock, Marcus's law office was receiving calls from the Bar Association about expedited investigation procedures and mandatory hearing attendance. His professional reputation, the foundation of his conspiracy against me, was now under formal ethical review. I leaned back in my chair, looking at the stack of affidavits on my desk. This was the leverage I needed. Brenda and Marcus were trying to frame me for financial abuse, but here was proof that Marcus was the one abusing his position. He was a predator who preyed on the very people I'd spent my life working alongside. The anger I felt was not just personal anymore. It was on behalf of Martinez, Chen, and Foster. Men who worked with their hands and trusted a man in a suit to do the right thing. Marcus had betrayed that trust. At 4:47, my phone buzzed with a text from Mike Rodriguez. Thompson just left his office, carrying 3 boxes of files, heading toward his car. Want me to follow? No need, I typed back. I know exactly where he is going. Marcus would be driving straight to Brenda Panic, overriding his usual caution. The conspiracy that had begun with confidence and careful planning was about to become a desperate scramble for survival. Let them panic. Let them make mistakes. The real war was just beginning. I gathered the files, the affidavits, and the recording. It was time to prepare for the visitor I knew was coming. Kendra would not let her mother's accusations stand without verification. She would come to the source. And when she did, I would be ready to show her exactly who she had married and who raised her. 2 days of professional crisis had given Kendra time to process everything she had learned at the cafe. The drive to Banks Construction's headquarters felt like traveling toward a reckoning she had been avoiding her entire adult life. My office building stood solid against the April sky. Brick and steel and honest workmanship. Everything Marcus's glass tower pretended to be, but was not. Sarah, my secretary for 8 years, greeted Kendra with the warmth reserved for family members who actually showed up to job sites and company picnics. He is expecting you, honey. Go right in. I stood when she entered, reading her body language with the careful attention I'd learned from watching Brenda's moods for 30 years. But Kendra carried herself differently. Professional posture, clinical distance, the bearing of someone who had made difficult decisions. Dad, we need to discuss what is happening between you and Mom. Her voice held the careful neutrality she used with troubled patience. I have spent 2 days analyzing the situation, and I need to understand your perspective. What has your mother told you? That you are exhibiting controlling behaviors, financial manipulation, possible emotional abuse. She sat across from my desk, hands folded precisely. She wants me to support her victim narrative using my professional credentials. The clinical language was jarring coming from my daughter, but I recognized her strategy. She was distancing herself emotionally to evaluate facts objectively. And what do you think? I asked. I think Mom tried to manipulate me the same way she has apparently been manipulating you. Kendra's brown eyes, so much like Brenda's, but clearer, somehow studied my face. Show me the evidence, Dad. I need to hear what you heard. I hesitated. Once I played that recording, there would be no protecting her from the truth about her mother and husband. But Kendra was 30 years old, a licensed psychologist capable of handling reality. I pressed play on my phone. Brenda's voice filled the office. When the old fool finally signs the papers, we will have everything we planned for. Kendra's expression did not change for the first minute. Professional detachment held, as she listened to her mother mock 30 years of marriage, heard Marcus calculate legal strategies for maximum financial damage, absorbed their cold discussion of timeline and asset division. But when Brenda said 30 years of playing the devoted wife, Kendra's composure cracked slightly. Her hands clenched once, then relaxed. The recording continued. Marcus's voice filled the room. Kendra's hesitation to support you immediately becomes evidence. We position her psychology training as something Isaiah exploited. The recording ended. Silence stretched between us like a bridge neither wanted to cross first. "How long have you known?" she asked finally. 6 days. I overheard this conversation at your house last Tuesday. And you have been what? Building a defense strategy while pretending everything was normal. Something like that. She leaned back in her chair, processing. Mom asked me to evaluate your mental state. She wanted me to provide professional opinion that you were exhibiting abusive patterns. What did you tell her? That I could not ethically assess someone without proper evaluation. That her claims seemed inconsistent with your established behavioral patterns. Kendra's voice carried a note of anger now. She tried to use my training as a weapon, Dad. Against you and against professional standards. The weight of betrayal, not just mine, but hers, settled between us. I am sorry you have been dragged into this, sweetheart. I am not. Her tone sharpened with resolve. I am glad I know the truth. The question is, what happens now? I studied my daughter's face. Seeing strength I had helped build, but independence I could not control. That is your choice, Kendra. I will not ask you to choose sides. I already have. She stood up. Decision made. I choose truth over family loyalty. I choose evidence over emotion. And I choose to support the parent who did not try to manipulate my professional ethics. Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by concern. What about Marcus? What about him? Her voice went cold. My husband participated in a conspiracy to financially destroy my father while using my psychology practice as cover. That marriage is over. But not yet. What do you mean? I mean that if I confront him now, he will know you have the recording. He will panic and destroy evidence or hide assets. Kendra looked at me with a strategic intensity that mirrored my own. If they are planning to file emergency motions on Monday, let them. Let them commit to their lies under oath. I will stay silent. I will play the confused daughter who does not want to get involved. And when they stand in that courtroom, thinking they have won, I will be sitting right behind you. You can do that. Live in the same house with him knowing what you know. I'm a psychologist, Dad. I know how to wear a mask. She moved toward the door, then paused. I will testify honestly about family dynamics if needed, but I will not be anyone's weapon, including yours. I understand. Good, because there is one more thing I need to do. She left my office with the determined stride of someone who had found moral clarity in a situation designed to destroy it. I sat alone in my office, surrounded by the evidence of 35 years of honest work, and felt something I had not experienced since this nightmare began. Hope. Monday morning brought the rain, and with it, the final act of their desperate performance. Brenda sat in the conference room of a lawyer Marcus had hired to avoid conflicts of interest. A woman named Linda Hawthorne, who had a reputation for aggressive litigation and a lack of curiosity about the truth. Linda pushed the documents across the table. These are standard affidavits, Mrs. Banks. You are swearing, under penalty of perjury, that your husband has created an unsafe environment and that you fear for your physical well-being. Brenda picked up the pen. For a second, she hesitated. The weight of 30 years pressed down on her wrist. 30 years of safety, provided by the man she was about to accuse of terror. But then she thought of the declined credit card. She thought of the silence at the country club. She thought of the life she felt she was owed. She signed. Marcus stood in the corner, watching with the intensity of a predator. He needed this signature. The bookie he owed $40,000 to had given him until Wednesday. This court order was his only way to access the emergency funds he needed to keep his legs unbroken. Once the judge grants the temporary order, Marcus explained, we will have immediate access to the frozen accounts for spousal maintenance. $15,000 to start. That would buy him time. He watched the ink dry on the page and felt the first moment of relief he'd experienced in weeks. It was done. The trap was set. The machinery of the legal system moved with terrifying speed when abuse was alleged. By 2 o'clock, the papers had been stamped, filed, and authorized. A temporary restraining order granting Brenda exclusive use of the marital home and mandating no contact from Isaiah. A motion for emergency financial support, citing economic abuse. It was a nuclear strike designed to leave me homeless and broke within 24 hours. I was reviewing the final specs for the hospital wing when the process server arrived. He was a heavy-set man in a raincoat, looking uncomfortable to be walking onto a busy construction site. Mr. Banks. I nodded. You have been served. He handed me a thick envelope sealed in plastic against the rain. My foreman, Mike, looked ready to intervene, his hand tightening on his radio, but I waved him off. It is okay, Mike. Just paperwork. I waited until the man left before opening the packet. I stood in the shelter of the job site trailer and read the lies my wife had signed her name to. Paragraph 4, claiming I had threatened to burn down the house if she ever tried to leave. Paragraph 7, alleging I had physically blocked her from leaving a room during an argument that never happened. Paragraph 12, stating I was intentionally starving her financially to punish her for her independence. It was fiction, but it was dangerous fiction. In the eyes of the law, I was now a threat. I was a monster who needed to be restrained by the power of the state. Most men would have panicked. Most men would have driven home to scream or beg or fight, which was exactly what Marcus wanted me to do. Any contact now would be a violation of the order and grounds for arrest. But I was not most men. I was a builder. I understood that sometimes you had to let a structure collapse to clear the ground for something new. I pulled out my phone and dialed my attorney. James, they filed. Just as we predicted. James's voice was calm, professional. Did they claim physical fear? Yes. And financial control? Yes. Perfect, James said. They just locked themselves into a story they cannot prove and we can disprove with a single recording. Do I have to leave the house? Immediately. Do not give them any ammunition. Go to the hotel. We will see them in court on Thursday. I walked to my truck, feeling strangely light. I was being evicted from the home I built. I was being accused of crimes I had not committed. My wife was trying to destroy me. But as I looked at the rain washing over the job site, I smiled. They had swung for the fences, but they had missed the ball completely. They thought this restraining order was my prison. They did not realize it was their coffin. By filing these false affidavits, they had committed perjury. They had turned a messy divorce into a criminal conspiracy. And on Thursday, I was going to introduce them to the consequences. I started the engine and drove away from the site, not as a victim fleeing a burning house, but as a general retreating to high ground to watch the enemy walk into the ambush. Tuesday morning found Brenda walking through the master bedroom, running her hands over the silk drapes and feeling the intoxicating rush of victory. The house was finally hers. No Isaiah waking up at 5 to check emails. No work boots by the back door. Just the silence of ownership she had craved for years. She spent the morning on the phone, launching the second phase of her campaign. She called Linda Patterson. She called Susan Morrison. She called the chairwoman of the Charity League. To each of them, she told the same carefully rehearsed story. "I had to do it," she whispered into the receiver, her voice trembling just enough. "I was afraid for my life. Isaiah has changed. He's not the man we thought he was." She expected sympathy. She expected outrage on her behalf. She expected the wagons of Davenport society to circle around her. She was wrong. When Brenda arrived at the Golden Shear Salon for her standing Tuesday appointment, the receptionist did not offer her the usual sparkling water. "I am sorry, Mrs. Banks," the girl said, not making eye contact. "Pierre is running very late today. We will have to reschedule." "But I have had this appointment for 10 years, Brenda argued. "Pierre always makes time for me." The stylist appeared from the back room. He looked at Brenda with a mixture of pity and discomfort. "Not today, Mrs. Banks. We are fully booked. Please call us next week." The silence in the salon was heavy. Other women looked at their magazines or checked their phones, refusing to acknowledge the woman standing at the counter. Brenda left with her face burning, realizing for the first time that the air in town had turned cold. She did not know that I had been busy too. 35 years of honest dealing had earned me credibility that no legal maneuvering could destroy. On Sunday afternoon, while Brenda was panic planning with Marcus, I had met with Pastor Williams in his study. I sat with my head bowed, a grieving husband concerned for his wife's soul. "I am worried about her mental state, Pastor," I had said quietly. "She has fallen under the influence of our son-in-law, and I believe she is having some sort of breakdown. She is making wild accusations, trying to push everyone away. I am just trying to protect her from herself until she comes to her senses." The pastor had placed a hand on my shoulder, promising to pray for her recovery. On Monday morning, I had coffee with the president of the Chamber of Commerce. We discussed the new hospital wing, but as I was leaving, I let my guard down for a moment. "It is a difficult time at home," I admitted. "Brenda is going through something. You might hear some strange stories. We are handling it privately, but it is heartbreaking to watch someone you love lose touch with reality." By Tuesday noon, the narrative in Davenport had shifted. Brenda was not a victim of abuse. She was a woman suffering a midlife crisis, targeting a beloved community pillar. Her frantic phone calls and dramatic accusations only confirmed the sad story I had planted. Every lie she told was received as a symptom of her illness. Marcus fared no better. The legal community in a mid-sized city is a small ecosystem, and news of a bar association investigation travels faster than a court filing. At 2 o'clock, Marcus received a call from Frank Miller, owner of Miller Logistics, his largest retainer client. "Marcus, I am sending a courier over to pick up our files," Frank said, his voice stripped of its usual friendliness. "We are moving our legal representation to a larger firm, effective immediately." Marcus gripped the phone, his knuckles white. "Frank, we have been with you for 3 years. Is this about the billing dispute?" It is about risk management, Marcus. We are hearing rumors about client trust fund irregularities. Miller Logistics cannot have that kind of exposure. Good luck. The line went dead. By Wednesday evening, the isolation was absolute. Brenda sat in the house she had stolen, surrounded by luxury she could not enjoy. Her friends were not returning her calls. The country club had suspended her privileges, pending the resolution of family legal matters. Even the neighbors turned away when she checked the mail. She called Marcus seeking reassurance, but found only panic. "My practice is bleeding to death," Marcus shouted over the phone. "I lost 2 more clients today. The bar hearing is tomorrow morning, and I have to prepare for your restraining order hearing in the afternoon. We have to win this, Brenda. If we don't get access to those accounts, I am finished." They were 2 people, standing on a shrinking island of lies, watching the tide come in. They thought they were fighting a legal battle, but they had already lost the war of public opinion. And tomorrow, in Judge Patterson's courtroom, they would lose everything else. The Davenport County Courthouse felt different on Thursday morning, as if the weight of 35 years of honest reputation had crystallized into something tangible I could carry into battle. Judge Samuel Patterson presided over domestic relations court with no-nonsense efficiency, having seen every form of family deception imaginable. He sat behind the high mahogany bench, peering over reading glasses that magnified his skepticism. Brenda sat at the plaintiff's table with Marcus, wearing the carefully chosen outfit of a battered wife. A conservative, gray dress, minimal makeup, and a nervous demeanor that might have been genuine given the stakes. "All rise," the bailiff announced, and the room shuffled to its feet. Judge Patterson waved us down and opened the file. "We are here on the matter of the temporary restraining order and emergency financial support petition in Banks versus Banks. Mr. Thompson, you may proceed." Marcus stood up, smoothing his tie. He looked composed, but I could see the tremor in his hands. He was fighting for his life, and he knew it. He began, his voice projecting the righteous indignation of a protector. "We are here because my client Brenda Banks is in immediate danger. For 30 years, she has lived under a regime of financial control and emotional intimidation that has recently escalated into direct threats against her safety." Brenda took the stand with her head bowed. Under Marcus's questioning, she wove a tapestry of lies that turned our life upside down. She described a marriage where she was a prisoner in her own home. She claimed I monitored her phone calls, tracked her car mileage, and forced her to account for every penny spent on groceries. Last week, she testified, her voice trembling with practiced vulnerability. "He completely cut off my access to money. I was left with nothing. He told me that if I tried to leave, he would burn the house down with me inside." She paused to wipe a tear from her cheek. "I am terrified, Your Honor. I do not know what he is capable of." I watched my wife of 30 years perjure herself with increasing confidence. Each lie built upon the previous one, creating a fictional monster from a man who had spent decades providing every comfort she had demanded. Judge Patterson listened intently, taking notes. His expression was unreadable, but he looked at me more than once, his eyes narrowing. In the current climate, allegations of domestic abuse were taken with deadly seriousness, and Brenda was playing the part perfectly. Marcus moved in for the kill. "Your Honor, given the defendant's substantial assets and my client's total lack of resources, we are requesting immediate spousal support of $15,000 per month, retroactive to the date of separation." We also ask that the temporary restraining order remain in effect to ensure Mrs. Banks's safety while these proceedings continue. She has no other home. She has no income. She is completely dependent on the mercy of this court. The courtroom was silent. On the surface, it was an open and shut case. A wealthy, powerful man crushing a helpless, dependent woman. Marcus sat down, looking at Brenda with a subtle nod. They thought they had done it. They thought the performance was enough. Judge Patterson turned to my attorney, James Morrison. Does the defense wish to respond? James stood with the calm authority of a man who does not need to shout to be heard. He adjusted his jacket and looked briefly at me. We did not exchange a word. We didn't need to. The trap had been sprung, and now it was time to collect the catch. Your Honor, James said, walking toward the bench. We absolutely wish to respond, but not with testimony. We have evidence that Mrs. Banks's claims are not only false, but part of a criminal conspiracy to defraud this court. That is a substantial accusation, Counselor Judge Patterson, leaning over the bench, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. You are alleging that the plaintiff committed perjury in my courtroom. James placed a small silver flash drive on the clerk's desk. We have audio recording of Mrs. Banks and her counsel, Mr. Thompson, planning this exact scenario 6 days prior to the filing. Marcus shot to his feet, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. Objection, Your Honor. This is inadmissible. Illegal wiretapping. Violation of attorney-client privilege. James did not flinch. He turned to face Marcus with a look of pity. The defendant was present in the home he owns, Mr. Thompson, which negates expectation of privacy in common areas. Furthermore, the crime-fraud exception applies to privilege. You were not giving legal advice. You were conspiring to commit a felony. Judge Patterson silenced Marcus with a single raised hand. Sit down, Counselor. If this evidence is what Mr. Morrison claims it is, I want to hear it. Play the recording. The courtroom speakers crackled to life. Brenda's voice filled the high-ceilinged room, clear and cruel. When the old fool finally signs the papers, we will have everything we planned for. I watched Brenda's face. The color drained from her skin, leaving her looking gray and aged. She stared at the speaker as if it were a ghost. The recording continued. Marcus's voice crisp and arrogant. The timeline is perfect. We claim financial abuse. We paint him as a controlling husband. Brenda's laughter followed a sound that made the court reporter look up in shock. 30 years of playing the devoted wife. God, the man actually believes I love him. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. The air felt heavy, suffocating under the weight of the truth. Judge Patterson listened to the entire segment. He heard them mock the court system. He heard them plan to manufacture evidence. He heard them discuss how to manipulate Kendra's professional ethics. The domestic abuse narrative they had spent an hour constructing crumbled into dust with every second the tape played. When the recording ended, the silence stretched for 10 seconds. Judge Patterson removed his glasses. He looked at Brenda, not with the sympathy of 20 minutes ago, but with cold fury. Mrs. Banks, do you have any explanation for this? Brenda opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She looked at Marcus for help. He was staring at the table, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Your Honor, Marcus began, his voice a shadow of its former confidence. I request a recess to confer with my client. Request denied, Judge Patterson snapped. I have heard enough. It is the finding of this court that the plaintiff's testimony was a complete fabrication designed to defraud the defendant and this court. The petition for a restraining order is dismissed with prejudice. The request for spousal support is denied. Furthermore, the temporary exclusive occupancy order is immediately vacated. Mrs. Banks, you have 2 hours to vacate the defendant's residence. But I am not finished, the judge continued, his voice rising. Mr. Thompson, Mrs. Banks, I am referring this matter to the district attorney's office with a strong recommendation for perjury and conspiracy charges. You have made a mockery of this legal system for personal gain. You attempted to weaponize statutes designed to protect abuse victims. That is unforgivable. The gavel came down like a thunderclap. Marcus tried to bolt. He grabbed his briefcase and turned toward the aisle, but 2 uniformed officers were already waiting at the double doors. They were not there for the perjury. They were there for the Bar Association complaint I had filed on Monday. Daniel Marcus Thompson, one officer said, stepping forward with handcuffs. We have a warrant for your arrest regarding the embezzlement of client trust funds. Marcus froze. He looked at me one last time, his eyes wide with the realization of total defeat. I did not look away. I sat still as a stone, watching them cuff the man who thought he could steal my life. Brenda sat alone at the plaintiff's table, weeping into her hands, totally ignored by the court she had tried to manipulate. Justice had not just been served. It had been delivered with a sledgehammer. The wheels of justice ground slowly, for some, but for Brenda and Marcus, they moved with crushing speed. 2 weeks later, the divorce settlement reflected the magnitude of their miscalculation. Because of the documented fraud and attempted perjury, Judge Patterson voided any claims to spousal support. Brenda left the marriage with exactly what she had brought into it, which was nothing but her clothes and a used sedan I generously allowed her to keep. The prenuptial agreement she had forgotten signing in 1987 held firm, and her criminal behavior eliminated any equitable distribution arguments. She works at the cosmetic counter at the mall now. The same mall where she used to spend thousands of dollars on a whim. I saw her there once from a distance. She was trying to sell a moisturizer to Linda Patterson. Linda looked right through her, took the sample, and walked away without a word. The social exile was permanent. Brenda lives in a small apartment on the south side of town, the kind of place she used to mock when we drove past it. She calls, sometimes leaving weeping messages about missing her life, but I never answer. I blocked the number months ago. Marcus traded his Italian suits for a jumpsuit. The Bar Association investigation revealed he had stolen over $120,000 from client trust accounts to fund his gambling habits and office rent. He is currently serving 3 years in state prison for embezzlement and fraud. His gambling debts followed him inside, and from what I hear, he is having a very difficult time navigating the prison hierarchy without his status to protect him. He lost his law license, his reputation, and his freedom. The arrogance that led him to believe he could outsmart a man who built a business from the ground up became his undoing. Kendra filed for divorce the morning after the hearing, citing irreconcilable differences and fraud. She did not ask for anything except her name back. She is Dr. Kendra Banks again. She sold the house where I first heard the conspiracy and moved into a condo closer to the river. She is building a new practice, focused on family therapy with particular expertise in recognizing manipulation patterns in relationships. She apologized to me only once. I told her there was nothing to forgive. She was a victim of the con just as much as I was. We have dinner every Sunday now, just the 2 of us. No performances, no secrets. Just a father and daughter rebuilding the trust that was stolen from us. The silence in my life is no longer heavy. It is peaceful. The toxic element has been removed, and the air is finally clear. 6 months later, I stood with Kendra on the observation deck of the new Skyline Medical Center project. The steel skeleton of the building rose against the blue sky, a testament to what happens when you focus on work instead of schemes. The wind whipped at our coats, but it felt clean. Banks construction had not just survived the scandal, it had thrived. The community support during my family difficulties translated into new contracts and deeper business relationships. People knew I was a man who stood by his word and protected what was his. I handed Kendra a rolled set of blueprints. She took them, her weight shifting slightly in the gravel. "What is this, Dad?" "It is the deed to the land next to the river," I told her. "And the plans for the mental health clinic you always talked about opening. You are going to run it. You are going to build people up the way I built houses." She looked at the papers, then at me, tears welling in her eyes. Not the manipulative tears her mother used to cry, but honest tears of gratitude. "Dad, I do not know what to say." "You do not have to say anything. Just build it. Make it honest. Make it last." We watched the cranes swing overhead, 2 survivors standing in the dust of progress. I realized then that my legacy was not the money or the buildings. It was her. She had chosen integrity over easy money, and that made her richer than Brenda or Marcus could ever understand. The drive home that evening was quiet. I pulled into the circular driveway past the fountain Brenda used to obsess over. The house feels different now. It is quieter, yes, but it is honest. There are no whispered conversations in corners. No secret bank accounts. No performance of affection, hiding a dagger. I walked into the kitchen and made a sandwich, eating it at the counter while looking out at the backyard. I used to think silence was a sign of loneliness. Now I know it is the sound of peace. I missed the idea of the wife I thought I had, but I do not miss the woman who actually lived here. I rebuilt my life brick by brick, just like I always do. And this time, I built it on a foundation of truth. We often mistake silence for weakness and kindness for gullibility. But as Isaiah's story proves, the most dangerous person in the room is not the one shouting threats, but the one quietly gathering facts. You cannot steal a legacy that you do not have the character to maintain. While shortcuts and schemes might offer a temporary illusion of success, they always collapse under the weight of the truth. Build your life on foundations of hard work and integrity, because when the storms come, those are the only structures that remain standing. Be a builder, not a pretender. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. Do not forget to subscribe for more stories about justice served. Thank you for watching.